Welcome everybody to our PendulumLost podcast in collaboration with LDN Physio. It's part of our Run Ready series. Got Mitch and Sarah with us. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves again, tell everyone what you do, and also, can you also give me one New Year's resolution running specific?
Hi, my name is Sarah. I co-lead the running service here at LDN Physio with Mitch. I love treating running patients. Really looking forward to marathon season coming up. We're seeing lots of runners coming in the door at the moment, and yeah, looking forward to helping them with their marathon journeys.
Resolution?
Yeah. My resolution, I made this yesterday. I'm going to try and get a sub 25k, hopefully by the summertime.
Wow, okay.
Cool. Hello everyone, my name's Mitch. Just like Sarah, I co-lead the running service here. A bit of a running nerd really, love all things to do with running S&C, working with runners. New Year's resolution, I guess. Yeah, I mean, time goal, I'd love like a sub 2:55 marathon maybe. But I would just like to remain injury-free for the year. Something I've struggled to do for most of this year, so that will be my goal, if I can stay injury-free and keep.
Fair enough. I like that. So today we're going to talk about strength and conditioning for runners. But I think to start off with, first of all, what is strength and conditioning? And is it the same as me just going to the gym and just doing a bit of strength training, a bit of powerlifting, a bit of bodybuilding? There's so many words. What is it all?
Yeah, I think there's obviously some crossover between just general strength training and strength and conditioning. I like to think that S&C, well, strength and conditioning is a little bit more sports specific. You're training for a purpose of improving performance for your desired activity. So mainly just to improve, tissue tolerance for sports specific activity. I think that's probably, for me, where it differs a little bit.
I think, yeah, I agree. What you're trying to do is put the body under load and expose it to an environment where it's able to cope with the demands of the sport. And that's where it differs between going to the gym just to move or just to lift some weights. You need to apply specific parameters and put measures in place in order to expose the body to the right environment.
But I know running itself, it puts a bit of stress on the joints. So if I want to get better at running, okay, I'll start off running a couple times a week, and then I might make it 3 times, 4 times, I might go longer. I'm increasing the amount of stress and all that things you said. So is that what's going to get me better at running? That only, or is there other things I have to do?
I mean, yes, and that will get you better at running, of course. Like consistency is key, and sort of volume is king for this sort of thing. But to support the volume and to support the running that you're doing, it's incredibly important that you do support your body with the likes of strength and conditioning. I'm sure Sarah will touch on this in a second, but we know that running is a very monotonous, load-heavy sport. Lots of impact associated. The muscular demands are quite high, so to ensure that you can keep running and you can remain injury-free when you're running, you need to support that with the strength training in the gym.
Will the strength training make me a better runner?
Yes.
Yes.
Totally. So lots of research out there, we see it anecdotally as well, strength training increases running efficiency by a massive proportion. It's essentially free speed.
Interesting. But a lot of the runners that you see, or that I know of, running is the main thing they would do. So I think, strength training is, I'm guessing it's probably a spectrum. There's probably those that know it's important and integrate it. There's those that have no idea about it or wouldn't do it. And then there's maybe in the middle that know they probably should do it, but don't. Why is it that most people won't be including that in their running when they're plans?
I think a lot of people feel like this is my exercise, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And it's hard to ask somebody who perhaps doesn't really like the gym or doesn't have a background in strength training, somebody who runs and has always run, to strength train. I think we've mentioned before, a lot of people get away with it if you've been running your whole life and you're built for it and you've developed in such a way that you somehow get away with not strength training. But for the average Joe, I don't think you can expect optimal performance or to not get injured if you're not doing some degree of strength training in the week.
Also, yeah, just to expand on that point, we know that with runners who have very busy schedules, sometimes it's hard to balance work life, social life, running, and then also gym. It's hard to find time. So we often see that the first thing that will go will be the gym, right? Yeah, I'm a runner, I'm going to get better by running, I've got to sacrifice something, it's got to be gym. I want people to sort of reframe that as the gym is not some separate thing. The S&C is not its own entity, it's there to support the running. I think that's the biggest thing. You don't have to be a like an Arnold Schwarzenegger sort of level bodybuilder, but just something that will, if you love running, it will help you perform better and it'll help you stay running for longer.
Because I think the exercises in the gym, I think it would be easy to then not see the relationship between like a slow, steady, heavy squat and just running a sub 25k type thing. Completely different movements. So I think the things that we touched on, you said about speed. You said about injury-free. What are the kind of key points? If you were to sell it to me, what are the key points about what strength and conditioning will do and will benefit when running?
So we're going to think sort of tissue load capacity is the first thing that comes to play. We know that we can increase your connective tissues, your musculoskeletal system. We know that we can increase their load tolerance, what they're happy to do through things in the gym. So like, your running economy, your speed, your power, your efficiency, all of these things can be improved by improving your muscular endurance, meaning you can run longer because your muscles don't get as tired, they don't get as fatigued. We can improve what's called like the elastic recoil of your tendons, so the ones that help you sort of jump and hop and those sort of things with an exercise that's called a plyometric. These are the ones that, again, are free speed. They get you running faster, they get you running longer, and you just don't tire as easily.
And if I was running, I don't know, multiple times a day, I think you talked about sacrificing something. If now I have to then flip it the other way, if I'm running 5 times a week, sacrificing one of my runs for the gym, you talked about the benefits of the strength training, but is actually going to have a negative impact on my running?
I don't think it'll have a negative impact on your running.
Yeah.
It depends on what your goals are. So if you're somebody who is running 5 times a week and you're trying to hit X amount of mileage in a week or kilometers, can you perhaps adapt the week so that you can still hit those miles but with less runs? Of course, with a sensible split across the week. Trying to prioritize at least one session a week of your strength and conditioning. I think that's definitely a conversation that we could have with somebody. Yeah.
So being better in fewer runs or more efficient with how I kind of work my mileage is the best thing. And then with gym, I think that probably a lot of the runners, I think with gym, and I think to first, a lot of people thinking when they think strength or when they think gym, they think massive, and not me myself, but I'm guessing, an elegant runner might be thinking, how am I going to run as fast with these massive guns? What would you say to someone who's fearful of that?
It's a really common misconception, I think. I often put it to my patients this way. If lifting weights made you bulky, I wouldn't look the way I look. Right? I've been lifting weights for a number of years and at a reasonable frequency. I'm still built like a bean. Right? We know that muscle strength, muscle gain, there's no such thing as building, bulky muscle or lean muscle. You just grow muscle. It's all the dietary stuff that makes a difference in terms of the size that you accrue. So we know that, sure, body weight may have a role to play in terms of your running efficiency, but you think about all the net benefits you will gain for being a stronger version of yourself. And don't worry, you're not going to accidentally become a Mr. Olympia by going to the gym once or twice a week for a couple of years.
Fair enough, because I see Sarah see some guns.
Yeah, well, different story for Sarah.
And because I think with the people who come to physio, they have a running injury, and you show them exercises as part of their rehab program. So then I think a lot of people see rehab exercises and running as part of their injury journey. So now they're fit and fighting, and I think is it the tough thing about them trying to integrate or continue those exercises and actually make it a plan? How do we get it into people's minds to think actually it's not just for injury, it's for life?
Yeah, I think when we give rehab exercises, depending on the severity of the injury, they may or may not be something that we want them to continue like forever. just at a different load. But yeah, it is hard to get across the message sometimes that this is something you're going to have to do ongoing. It doesn't just translate to rehab. It's going to be for life, but it is going to help them with performance and injury prevention, etc. in the future.
I think it's very cliche, but prevention is always better than the cure. I think so. As Sarah said, it's we know we will progress someone to being in the maintenance stage, where the exercises may look very different, as Sarah says, but there's still something there to support your running journey for sure.
And we're also hoping to get somebody back to better than they were before. So we're going to put measures in place so that they achieve that. They're going to be better than before they were injured.
And what are we talking about in general? Am I having to go to the gym 3-4 times a week and spending an hour, 2 hours in the gym at each time? What is this for a typical runner who doesn't integrate strength and conditioning? What does a typical kind of week look like?
Yeah. I mean, I like to keep it as simple as possible, to be fair. I mean, we're runners, we want to make things simple. We want to make sure they're not overcomplicated. Something is better than nothing is always what I will say. So if you don't have access to a gym or any equipment, don't feel like that is a barrier. Home exercises are totally fine as well. But we know that in order to gain some form of improvement from a strength perspective, around 2 to 3 times a week is awesome. I think if you're very busy, twice a week is sufficient. And once you're at a good baseline, once a week is enough to maintain and to prevent, if you can prevent injuries, but reduce the risk of injuries. But no, you don't have to go to the gym for hours and hours and hours. 20 minutes is fine. In, out, done.
And is yoga or Pilates, would that kind of count as a session if I didn't want to go to the gym?
I wouldn't substitute that for a good heavy gym session. I think they can be used alongside and they can be really, really helpful for flexibility and also as a form of a rest day, so like active recovery. But in terms of them enhancing performance, I don't think there's a substitute for actually going to the gym and lifting heavy weights.
I think Pilates could be a slight exception to that. I mean, like reformer Pilates especially is a crazy workout for the core. I think there's a really nice crossover for Pilates and running, but I totally agree with Sarah. It's not a substitute. Like you still need to be doing some form of heavy sport-specific load to see those tissue adaptations.
And what is it about running that is putting stress on my joints? Like, why do I need to increase my tolerance or tissue capacity for running? I feel like I'm just gliding through the air. It doesn't feel that tough on my joints. Is it?
When you're running, from the waist down, there's incrementally more load on the tissues from your hips down. And we talk about that in terms of how many times your body weight is coming down on a certain structure at any one given step. So when we talk about trying to make the body accustomed to dealing with that load, that's when we can break things up into individual exercises and give people what they need in terms of like how much load is going through each of those structures.
How much load would be going through my knees or hips, would you say?
About 5 times your body weight through your knees.
That's
About 5.5
for me, that's quite a lot, I think, with the dad bod. And so you talked about like plyometrics. So that would, I'm guessing, also be putting that amount of stress. So is that kind of negative as well? Do I have to train for plyometrics, or is plyometric helping in a different way?
Again, this is where you build the plyometrics nice and slowly. Like, we're not going to give you the hardest variation of something straight away. Manny, I imagine you wouldn't go for a 140 kilogram bench press within the first week. So
you never know.
You never know. But it's all about sort of progressing things sensibly. So, I mean, for us, we know that yes, Sarah's right. Through the calf complex, around 6 to 8 times your body weight. Through the knee, around sort of 4 to 5. That doesn't mean that you have to lift 4 to 5 times your body weight in the gym. But yes, plyometrics are a way that we can give you a little bit of that sort of similar load that is emulated when you run. But we just keep the dosages relatively short rather than hitting the ground 20,000 times across a 20k run, for example. We get you doing short bursts in the gym.
It doesn't take as much sets and reps as we think with plyometrics in order to get the adaptations.
And would you say the plyometric part is still part of this strength and conditioning kind of like bubble we're talking about, or is it completely separate?
Yeah. Totally part of the same bubble.
Yeah. And I'm guessing I can't just do plyometrics or just do my bench pressing? Is it a mix of that, would you say?
It's definitely good to have a combination. I don't know about the research that looks into bench press and how that affects your running, but if we were looking at other sort of compound lifts like a squat or a deadlift, for example, they are really good to be doing some form of both if you can. As a runner, I'm quite biased towards plyometrics, to be honest. I think they are the most underutilized exercise, and I think if more runners were doing them, I think we'd be earning less money as physios.
But you could do, let's say you didn't like doing plyometrics, or for example, you just feel like the impact on those days and just wanted to do strength. Is that a good starting point? Yeah,
Totally.
And then we mentioned bench press only because you talked about my 140 kilo bench press, but that is an important question, is when people talk about strength conditioning for running, you think of squat, they think of lunges and deadlifts. Does upper body actually play a part? Is there any point in me building up my chest and arms?
If you're trying to make the best use of time, I would stick to the legs. That's not to say that you can't benefit from like doing things like rows and like bicep curls and like stuff for your abductors. Your arms are in this position for anywhere from half an hour to 4 or 5 hours sometimes, depending on what race you're doing. Yes, you can benefit, but I think if you're somebody who's like trying to prioritize and you're stuck for time, leg sessions at the gym are key.
Okay, so a priority for the legs, but access to the arms. Yeah. And then when we are talking about legs, there's so many things you hear about. There's the things I've physios talked about, maybe like the slow, heavy, there's the eccentric, single legs, compound lifts. Is there a hierarchy? Is there priorities? Do they work on completely different things?
Yeah, I think again, when we're talking about sort of specificity, the really heavy and slow resistant stuff is going to be amazing for tendon adaptation. So the connective tissue between your muscle and your bone, tendons really like heavy load, and when done slowly, it's a really good way that they can get stronger. So often if I'm dealing with a tendon-related pathology and we're trying to increase that tissue's capacity, heavy and slow is fantastic. We also know that the eccentrics are amazing as well. So that would be the like the slowly lengthening portion of a lift. Say you're doing a calf raise, you're on a step, you're very slowly lowering your heels back towards the ground. These are also amazing for sort of tendon adaptation. I think the key thing though is that there's no, there isn't necessarily a hierarchy. I think it's good to get a combination of all types of muscle contraction in. We're working on endurance and speed and power. I don't think it's as linear as just sort of sticking with one and going through. I think it should be a combination of all types of training.
Is there favourite exercises you normally give to runners?
I love a Bulgarian split squat.
I love it, okay, yeah.
Yeah, love doing them myself, and I love teaching somebody how to do them.
Okay, fine. And if some people, like deadlifts is like sometimes a fear word, right? So if people don't like deadlifts or they don't like squats, obviously you mentioned Bulgarian split squats, there is not you have to do X, Y, and Z. There is a variety of things, and I'm guessing people can adapt their program to what they enjoy, I'm guessing? Or are there ones that you say you have to do?
Yeah, again, look, I think this is really cliche and quite cringe. I think all physios use this, but the best exercise is the one you're going to do, right? So if I was to give you an exercise that I think is amazing, but you absolutely hate it, there's no chance you're going to do it. So this is where we want to try and make the exercises as fun as possible, if exercises can be fun. Again, I think we want to minimize the barriers to entry. So if you don't like a deadlift or you don't like a squat, we can, we substitute for a leg press or a leg extension or something along those lines.
If I've heard someone say that, I can get quite strong if I did like hill running or trail running. Obviously that feels quite different to the strength and conditioning that we talked about. Is there any merit to that, and is that as beneficial? Or?
Is it as beneficial if they're doing a different type of terrain?
Yeah, going to the gym.
No. No. Again, I don't think there's any substitute for going in and lifting some heavy weights. If we're talking about different terrain, if that's what you're asking, there's more load on different structures depending on what kind of terrain you're running on. So for example, running uphill, there's going to be more stress on what's called the posterior chain, so glutes, hamstrings, calves. You might get more defined calves if you're a trail runner. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe I need to give it a go.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know, because I think then sometimes going that kind of terrain, your distance will probably be a lot shorter,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
So then I'm guessing that's probably a different type of run within the kind of whole week. You know, is that something that you'd recommend to a lot of people anyway? Or actually, if they're not doing it and they're doing strength and conditioning, they don't need to change up their running too much?
You mean like in terms of like variable terrain and those
Yeah.
sort of things? Yeah, I think variable terrain is key. I think hard in London, if you live in London, we don't have that many trails or hills or anything, but variable terrain is really, really key. So changing the surface that you're running on is so important so that the tissues adapt to different stimulus. So if you're only ever running on a track, for example, or you're only ever running on the road, or only ever running on the grass, your tissues will adapt to that. And then again, it's that monotonous load that does not change. Your injury risk is slightly higher. If you change it up as frequently as possible, more variability, the muscles and the tendons and the connective tissues, they adapt to different stimulus. It's a much better way to get strong.
So when I was younger, I always thought if I got a running injury, it was because of my trainers. And now obviously we're talking about the importance of remaining injury-free through strength and conditioning. Is that the key point from injury prevention? Is that strength and conditioning? Or is actually that's something that should be done, but there are other things that will keep you more injury-free from running?
I think Mitch and I could talk all day about trainers. But the key thing about the trainers is wear comfortable trainers. You can get really technical about the drop and the foam and if it has a plate or not. But yeah, I think if we get the fundamentals right, it's not to say that, you know, if you're wearing a really crap old pair of trainers, that's not the culprit. But if we get the fundamentals right, if we have somebody who's doing their strength training, they're running at a sensible split throughout the week, they're eating properly, they're sleeping properly, and they're seeking advice when they need it, that's so much more important than the newest trainers or, you know.
Yeah, I think, as Sarah said, I think the trainers themselves are maybe a much smaller piece of the puzzle. And look, the strength training is key, don't get me wrong. That's a much bigger piece of the puzzle than your trainers are, for example. But we know that the single biggest predictor, the single biggest cause for running related injuries is what we call a training error. It's just doing too much too soon. So you can do all the strength training in the world and you can nail everything else, but if you're running too much too quickly, you're doing too much high intensity work, you're progressing too fast, there's a very good chance you're going to get injured. So you need to get on top of that first.
It's a very a specific formula that you need to apply to not get injured. It's hard to.
The stars do have to align.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you need to be sensible and you need to not be silly and listening to your body and allowing tissues to adapt.
And then with including the strength and conditioning kind of sessions, you know, does it matter if you're only running once a week compared to already know if you're running 3-4 times a week, you know, how key that is. But if you're a very, very low volume runner, once a week, maybe a few K, because I know the answer is always going to be it depends, but I'm just trying to think of that spectrum, you know, like how important, is it important for absolutely everyone, or actually if you're just not running that much, probably can get by?
It depends.
I shouldn't plant that, I shouldn't tell you that the word it depends.
So I mean, look, it's going to be much more important for those higher volume runners, don't get me wrong. But it's still fairly critical for runners who are, you know, even if they are running, you know, once a week. But of course, it will be less important than for those who are doing a lot more. And it simply just comes down to how much demand those two different runners are putting on their bodies. As a higher volume runner, you're going to be putting a lot more stress, a lot more sort of load through the body. So you need your tissues to be strong enough to adapt to all of those loads. Someone running a little bit less, again, it's still going to be important, but perhaps a little bit less so.
I think you can argue with that though, in a sense that somebody who's only running once a week, they may not have the tissue adaptation in order to prevent injury because they're not doing it frequently enough. So when they do go out for a run then, they may be at a higher risk of getting injured just because they're not used to it, they're not doing it frequently enough. But yeah, if somebody came into me and they said they run once a week, I would encourage them to run twice a week.
Okay.
For sure, yeah.
And then start adding some strength and conditioning after that. So does someone like Sir Mo Farah, would he be in the gym training, doing some weights, you know, because obviously we see videos of him and it's always running. But someone, I'm talking about now, really high level. Yeah. is that very common in the elite runners?
Yes, absolutely. You'd be hard pressed to find an elite these days who's not doing a lot of S&C and dedicated S&C. I think, especially these days, I think maybe, back when, Sermo Farah was at his peak, he still would have been, yes, but if we looked at the elites from, the 50s, 60s, they perhaps wouldn't have been. I think the research has changed. People have become a lot more aware about sort of strength and conditioning over the last few years. But yeah, someone as recent as Sermo, for sure.
Do you think it's not promoted as much by the elites, that part of their training?
They're trying to keep their secrets to themselves.
Oh, maybe.
I don't want us to be elites.
That way. It certainly seems that way, but no, they're doing it.
Yeah, because I'm guessing it just maybe doesn't look as sexy. Or in part of the training. So that's interesting to know. And I'm guessing they would be. It's just absolutely part of their training kind of week, as well as you touched on, like kind of nutrition and sleep. Because now if you're adding something, heavy weights to it, I'm guessing the fueling and the sleep, the requirement changes from just running multiple times. And how much of an impact do you think that has?
A massive impact.
Massive impact.
A massive impact. Again, when we're looking at, I like to look at this as like a jigsaw puzzle, right? We spoke about bigger pieces of the puzzle, smaller pieces of the puzzle. Training load is the biggest, right, by a mile. But sleep and recovery and like adequate rest are huge. Fueling is a massive part as well. I think, unfortunately, within the running space, I think there is this sort of connotation that you have to be, thin and skinny to be fast, and sometimes that does promote underfueling in the sport, unfortunately. But I think that there has been a little bit of a paradigm shift. I think that is changing now, which is great. A lot more of elite athletes are talking about it. We just want people to realise that you don't have to earn carbohydrates. For example, they are an essential fuel so that you can go and run. But yeah, to answer your question, huge piece of the puzzle for sure.
Just on the subject of fueling, a nutritionist told me this once. It's extremely difficult to be in an energy surplus when you're training for a running race. It's insanely hard to keep your calorie count high enough so you're not in a deficit.
Yeah.
Can you just eat McDonald's while running?
Dead right, yeah.
Yeah. If you're in pain and you do some exercises and the pain improves, you see a linear, a relationship between them. And strength, you're doing weights and you see the weight increasing that you're lifting, fine. For injury prevention, the more I do, and if it's going to help my injury prevention, I don't really see that unless you get, you're saying to them you're not going to get injured or your injury risk decreases. So I think that's a really hard thing to see. So how do you actually motivate someone or explain to someone that it's like I don't know what it is. It's you're preventing something that may or may not happen, but it is important. What kind of words of wisdom would you give?
Miss Kenny.
That's what I always find difficult.
Yeah, fair.
Saying do this and the risk, but then I don't see it, and that's the kind of harder thing.
I think it might not be something that you can see objectively, right? Because you're either injured or you're not. I think if we were to look at it as if you use previous experiences, maybe say in a previous 10k build or a previous half marathon build, you were running 20 or 30k per week and you got injured. And then now, because of the strength and conditioning that work that you've done, you're now able to tolerate 40Ks or 50Ks. And I think if you look at that as a whole and be like, oh, last time I could only do 20 and I kept getting injured, now I'm doing much more and I'm feeling good. I think using that as an indirect measure of improvement, I think is what I would tend to use.
Also sensible and somewhat conservative building. So like you said, you can't always see the point at which you have overloaded a tissue. Sometimes you'll see it a couple of days later, sometimes you'll see it like a couple of weeks or months later. So long as you're being sensible about building, you should be fine. But I appreciate it's hard to know when you've done too much because your body mightn't let you know immediately.
Because would that have an impact on the recovery days? So if after a long run, it might be a couple of days of maybe a bit of aches or pains, and then you're back on it. Does strength and conditioning sessions kind of help with that? Do you think it would allow the recovery to either be shorter or a bit more pain-free?
Yeah, totally. So I mean, like again, by this point, a lot of us are probably familiar with the term DOMS, the like delayed onset muscle soreness. So if it is just muscular soreness because of like a high workload, for example, there's essentially like this little metabolic response. You get some inflammatory change. Your muscles feel sore after you've worked quite hard, and that's because you've pushed your body to exceed its current capacity by just a small degree. So you'd say this is its capacity. By doing the strength training, we increase its capacity. So now you can work at a much higher rate without you sort of tipping over that point at which you become sore. So yeah, the more strength training you do, the less sore you become post-exercise.
And then for take-home messages, New Year, New Year's resolution, what would you tell everyone if they could do one thing in the gym, not Bulgarian split sport, you got to pick something else. So they got one thing to get them going into their kind of strength and conditioning journey. What would it be? And also, I want you to tell me kind of like, again, put a bit of motivation. So that one kind of key one sentence to get their foot into the gym or a foot into a little mat that they're going to do with strength training. What's that one little key thing? Sarah's got words of wisdom.
Go on, Sarah.
Apart from get and do it.
I think the one exercise I would give people to start doing is giving yourself the goal of single leg pressing 1.5 times your body weight. And because running is a single leg sport, you need to have a lot of strength in the whole chain of movement in one single leg. So I think that's a really good goal to work towards. Words of wisdom I would give somebody. I think what's helped me is seeing results. The hardest thing is starting. Once you start, and once you start to see those results, something like lights a spark in you to want to keep going and do more. And once you feel better when you are doing what you love, and I assume people run because they love it, the feeling you get when you can do that better is like no other. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah. I think probably not too dissimilar from what I was going to say, I suppose, in terms of, I think if we look at it again, like I said earlier about it, not the gym work or the strength work not necessarily being a separate entity. Yeah. You don't have to love it per se, but it's there to support the stuff that you do love, which is the running, right? In terms of the key sort of takeaways, things for you to do in the gym, I'm going to be very general and not say a specific exercise, although I have many. It's just be consistent and enjoy the process.
I like that. You don't have to love it, you just have to do it.
Sometimes discipline is more important than motivation in that respect, I guess.
I like that. Appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining me today. And then good luck for your New Year resolutions. And hopefully everyone will be doing some strength and conditioning and then be injury free. And then they won't see you guys because they won't have any injuries.
Yeah, exactly.
But if they need any advice, you know where to find Mitch and Sarah. Thank you, everybody.